All right, good evening, everyone. This is the October 6th Westfield Board of Education meeting. Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, October 6, 2020. The board meeting will be held via an online platform, which can be accessed through a WebEx, which can be, the details can be located on the district website if you need them. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and to transact any other business to come properly before the board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Thursday, October 1st, 2020, caused to be posted at the Office of the Board of Education, located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap into Westfield, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Dana, may we have a roll call?
Michael Beelan.
Here.
Kent Diamond.
Here.
Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Rob Garrison.
Here.
Brian Morrissey.
Here.
Gretchen Oleg.
Here.
Tara Porto. Peggy Oster.
Here.
Amy Root.
Sorry, here.
Thank you, Dana. Brian, would you like to lead us in a flag salute?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Brian. I think we have a couple announcements this evening. Let's start with Michael.
The Rotary Club of Westfield is asking families to continue to contribute to the Rotary-sponsored Second Lunch Program. The collected food is so important to the families experiencing devastating hardships due to the pandemic-caused unemployment in our neighboring community of Elizabeth. Instead of students bringing lunch to school, the Rotary has designated 2 drop-off locations on Wednesday mornings before 11 a.m. And the 2 locations are on the south side of the home of Ray Kotziak at 438 Poe Avenue, and on the north side at the home of Ellen and Kevin Windorf, who live at 529 Hanford Place. The Rotary Club is requesting sandwiches be labeled, and non-perishable groceries are also greatly appreciated. St. Joseph's Social Service Center has provided a list of items that are most needed. The list, along with more information, is posted on the Community Flyers page under Family Resources on the district website. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Brendan, do you have an announcement?
I do. The mission of the Westfield Coalition for the Arts is to act as an advocate for the arts in our schools, including art, music, fine arts, theater, visual arts, and dance. The coalition raises public awareness of the arts programs currently in our schools, utilizes sources of community and financial support, and encourages our students' artistic endeavors. For more information, including how to support the Westfield Coalition for the Arts, visit the Community's Flyers page under Family Resources on the district website. You can also visit the coalition's website at www.westfieldcoalitionforthearts, all one word, .weebly, weebly.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Brian, do you have any announcements?
Yes, I do. I have one. The Westfield Municipal Alliance is hosting a virtual Community Connections meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, October 7th, from 7 to 8 p.m. If you are able to attend, please RSVP to westfieldalliance@gmail.com. That's Westfield, ALLINCE @gmail.com. And organizers will send the link for the Zoom meeting. The Municipal Alliance remains fully committed to its mission of educating the community and our schools about alcohol and substance use prevention.
Thank you, Brian. Rob, do you have an announcement?
I do. I'm having a little bit of some technical difficulties here, but let me see if I can pull mine up. Hold on. Let's actually come back to me if there's someone else, and then I'll.
Okay, Gretchen, I believe you have a couple of announcements.
I do. So the first announcement is about the New Jersey School Age Tuition Assistance Program, which is a program that can help families pay for care for school-age children in need of childcare as a result of the COVID-19 remote learning school schedules. To be eligible for this assistance, you must be a New Jersey resident. Your child must be attending school remotely, either part-time or full-time, and your annual gross household income cannot exceed $75,000. If you'd like to find out more information about this program, it can be found at childcarenewjersey.gov/COVID-19. I have another announcement, which is a reminder that our Parent-Teacher Council is going to host a virtual candidates night this Thursday, October 8th, from 7:30 to 9:30. That's in the evening, PM. Candidate profiles and information on how to register to attend can be found under the board tab on the district website at www.westfieldnjk12.org. A link to the virtual form will be provided on the day of the event to those who have registered. Please remember to submit your questions for the Board of Education candidates to ptc@westfieldnjk12.org by tonight. That's all I have.
Thanks, Gretchen. Rob, are you good? You're muted.
Congratulations to the following Westfield High School students who earned perfect scores on the August 29th SAT. Connor Daly, 11th grade math. Vijay Srivasan, 11th grade math. Justin Shen, 12th grade math level 2. Lillian Sheen, 11th grade biology, MN chemistry. Additionally, congratulations to Westfield High School senior Mira Mehta, who earned the Academic All-American Award from the National Speech and Debate Association. Fewer than 1% of the more than 141,000 student members of the association earn this prestigious award every year. The award recognizes academic rigor, competitive speech, and debate success, and personal excellence.
Thank you, Rob. Kent, I believe you have an announcement.
Yes, I have two, and I hope you don't mind the piano music in the background. In addition to our 3 Westfield High School National Merit semifinalists, Grace Endy, Samantha Sauls, and Maxwell Skialaba, who were announced at our last board meeting, we would like to congratulate 9 12th graders who had been recognized for their exceptional academic promise as commended students in the 2021 National Merit Scholarship Program. They are Carl Azaretto, Karan Chuli Parambil, Olivia Ebel, Jonathan Keenan, Mira Mehta, Sophia Nazaro, Aprina Wang, Benjamin Zakarenko, and Kaylee Zhao. Second announcement, hang on. The Here to Help Mental Health Coalition will hold a special virtual session entitled Strategies to Help Students with Social Isolation on Tuesday, October 13th from 7 to 8 p.m. The session will help parents and caregivers recognize signs that a child may be struggling and will offer strategies that they can use to provide support. More information, including how to register for the virtual event, can be found on the Community Flyers page under Family Resources at www.westfieldnjk12.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Amy, I believe you have an announcement also.
Yes, I actually have 2. The first one is, prior to COVID-19, buying food and household items presented a challenge to some of our Westfield public school families. COVID-19 continues to magnify these challenges. To assist our local families, the Westfield Parent-Teacher Council has set up a fundraiser. All money raised will be distributed in the form of gift cards to local grocery stores to families in the Westfield Public School District who need help. To protect anonymity, the school district will make these distributions. If you are a family with children in the public schools who does not qualify for free or reduced lunch,
yet could still use some help, please reach out to Director of Guidance Maureen Mazarise at Mazarise, which is MMAZZARESE at westfieldnjk12.org. To date, the PTC has raised over $22,000 for Westfield Public School families in need. These funds were distributed throughout the spring and summer as grocery gift cards. Information on how to make a donation is posted on the Community Flyers page under Family Resources on the district website. Please email ptc@westfieldnjk12.org with any questions. And my second announcement is, this is a reminder that all schools will be in session, I repeat, will be in session, for hybrid and all remote instruction on Monday, October 12th for students and staff. The Professional Development Day, originally scheduled for staff on October 12th, was moved to September 9th to help our educators prepare for the new school year. Hopefully everyone's made a note of that on their calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I also have two announcements. Last Friday was National Custodian Day, which takes on even more significance during this year of COVID-19. Our custodians and maintenance staff have worked tirelessly to ensure that our buildings and grounds are safe, clean, and running smoothly. Our PTOs provided a $50 gift card to each custodian to thank them for their hard work. And on behalf of the entire board, I want to extend our great appreciation for their important service to our district. Dr. Dolan included a short video tribute to these quiet heroes in her Friday email to the Westfield school community. In case you missed it, it is posted on video page under the district information on the district website. And just as an aside, the custodians have been in our schools since the COVID pandemic has started, getting our schools clean after we had been at school, and continuing to keep them clean when we weren't at school. They come in every day to clean our schools, and I have to say they always have a smile on their face. I'm sure they miss seeing all of the students because they do truly enjoy them, and I can only, thank them. I can't thank them enough for all that they do and what they bring to our schools, because they truly are a wonderful group of people, and we do truly appreciate all the work that they do. So on the side, thank you, thank you, thank you to our custodians. My next announcement is about our next scheduled Board of Education meeting, which will be held on Tuesday, October 27th. The time and location of the meeting will be announced later. Should the meeting be virtual, instructions for the public meeting regarding remote access are on the district website at www.westfieldnjk12.org under the board tab, the same as they have for the whole time we've been doing this remote board meetings. The complete agenda of the meeting will be available on Friday, October 23rd, also under the board tab on the district website. Okay, moving on. Sorry, I got a lot of papers here tonight. At this time, I'd like to recognize the public for agenda items only. You'll see there's a Q&A part. If you have a question, you can type it over on the side, and we will get back to you. I'm going to continue on because it may take a couple minutes for people to write their questions, if that's okay with everybody, and move on to our superintendent's report with Dr. Dolan.
Thank you. And actually tonight I'm going to do two. The first one is an update. We're now in the midst of the first week of October, and just like to give a few updates regarding how school is going. So we continue to focus on the foundation of our reopening plan, and that really is all about safety and the health of everyone. So we continue to make sure proper ventilation is in place, masks and 6 feet social distancing, and we continue to keep in mind that since eating is a high-risk activity, that is why our sessions have been 4-hour sessions. So I do think that our careful attention to all of these rules and all the guidelines from the federal government and the New Jersey Department of Health and the New Jersey Department of Education, the fact that we are all paying attention to this helps as people do come into contact with people who are positive, or as people in our community actually do test as being positive. It helps when we have been following all the rules. So we're very happy that last week Westfield High School was able to reopen after it had to be closed for 14 days. And we appreciate all the cooperation that we had from parents, students, and staff. We have heard from parents and staff that they find the rules for isolation and quarantining confusing. So last week, we worked from the guidance from the federal and state health departments, and we came up with a 2-page summary that was sent as part of my message last Friday to everyone in the community. If you hadn't had a chance to look at that and you have questions about what's the difference between isolating and quarantining and what are the rules and should I get tested, I would really suggest you take a look at that. We worked to try to make it clear for everyone, because the truth is it is confusing. So one point I would just like to point out, because it often is the most important part. So if a student or a staff member or family member is exposed to a person who has tested positive, right? So a person is exposed to someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, they must self-quarantine and monitor symptoms for 14 days from the last day of exposure. Exposure is defined as being within 6 feet of a COVID-19 person for 10 minutes with or without wearing a mask. Now, the 14-day quarantine period is necessary because it can take up to 14 days for the symptoms to appear. And so for that reason, this is the part that's confusing people, and I don't blame them at all. For that reason, even if you test negative for COVID-19 and you feel healthy, if you had direct contact with someone who tested positive, you must remain quarantined for 14 days. Okay, so that's a question that I can't tell you how often that question comes up. So moving on, today is the 18th day of a unique, or at least I certainly hope, a unique school year. There is no doubt that we are still assessing and reassessing our new schedules, our procedures, instruction, and every other aspect of our work. So let me just give an example of that. So our middle schools have listened to parent suggestions and are beginning to work on a number of different topics during the lunch study period. They're focusing on helping the students understand the technology better. They're helping the students with their executive functioning skills, as well as focusing on social and emotional learning. So some of the topics that are scheduled to be worked on with our middle school students: reinforcing the expectations for all students, whether they are in person or remote, helping students better understand how to organize their Google Drive, how to use Google Calendar to view assignments, how to utilize all functions of WebEx or Google Meet. And additionally, the counselors and teachers have plans to work on social and emotional learning with the students during these times. And these topics have all been suggested by students and or parents at the middle school level. Now, I've also heard from parents with children in kindergarten, first and second grade. Some parents worry about too much screen time and the limited attention spans of these youngest learners. And I think all of us can understand what a challenge that can be. I've also heard from parents at various levels who thank us for the afternoon hours that have provided their child with support. Yet other parents have indicated that they would rather that their child be allowed to socialize in the afternoon. So we continue to listen, to discuss, and to examine ways to address all the challenges at all the grade levels. Going forward, we are open to changes, but we must fully vet any changes before making them to ensure that we can keep our school community safe and well. And one more focus. Another focus for all levels has been back to school night. Lincoln School held theirs last week, and the elementary schools have theirs scheduled for this week. Secondary schools will provide them next week. These evenings include both live sessions with classroom teachers and recorded messages for special subject teachers, counselors, and administrators. So everything is new, even back to school night. And I'd like to thank everybody for all of their efforts thus far and going forward. Our new normal is challenging for students of all ages. It's challenging for our teachers. It's challenging for our administrators, and it is certainly also challenging for our parents. And I thank everyone for doing the best they can during what is truly a close to impossible situation. We'll keep trying, but we do realize it is difficult for everyone. So that would be the first presentation. And I have one other. I don't know if you want me to go on or pause for a moment.
I see that there are two Q&As. I don't believe either one really has to do with directly with the agenda. Would you like to see if we answer those two questions, and then we'll move on to the rest of them to be at the end of the period of time when we answer questions again?
I will either answer it now or later, whatever is wanted.
Well, let's take a minute and see if we can answer, because one has to do with the situation at Lincoln and Jefferson. The question came from Kim Fahey. Her question is, I struggle to understand how there was a positive COVID test for our staff in Lincoln and Jefferson, and the schools are not in quarantine status like the high school. If the staff member was working, there must have been contact someplace. So I know that.
Right. So a couple of things. One would be when we're any reports of someone who tests positive, right, that goes to the Department of Health. I'm not public health. I'm not trained in that. And then we very much count on their work in public health. They have protocol to use, they have interviews to use, and they are the ones who are skilled in that. And we rely on their judgment and their expertise. So when they investigated it, the answer is what I sent to all the parents. And I would also just reiterate what I said in the email. Certainly, I or the Department of Health is not going to talk about any specific situation. They will know more than I because they're the Department of Health. But anything that I do know, that's somebody's private information. If there was anything that was important for anyone who are in any of the schools, you'd be aware of that. We rely on the Department of Health, and we have to rely on them. If there was anything that anyone needed to know, you would have already been told regarding that. So I stand with the communication that way.
Why don't we just take one more, and then we'll move on to your Week of Respect report. The second question came from Griff Payon. Is there a plan at all to reopen schools this year? This highly concerns me. I feel my child in particular has a tremendous amount of downtime in both hybrid and in-school sessions. Where are the textbooks, workbooks, handouts, drill work?
Okay, my first suggestion, if you haven't already, please reach out first.
Sorry.
That's okay. I was going to say I don't have a dog. My first suggestion would be, if you haven't already, please reach out to your child's teacher or teachers. And if you've already done that, if you want to reach out to the principal in the school, maybe they can help you a little more specifically. The second would be as to whether we can reopen the schools. I certainly hope so, but that is absolutely going to depend on the guidance from the federal and state departments of health. Right now, with the guidance that is in place, we do not have a way to reopen it full-time for all students. Do I hope that changes? Yes, I absolutely do. And we'll be following it, and we'll be ready to reopen if that is the case that we're able to do that. But that entirely depends on what the guidance is.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dolan. The next two questions are very similar, so we can handle those and then we'll move on to the report. How are the middle school students going to be ready for the next grade? They are only getting about half of their core academics. Example, math is only 2 plus half periods a week. That means 4 full days of no math. Once again, the other question, one is from Julie Willard, and the other one is from Colleen Gibbons. Very similar questions in reference to 2.5 days of instruction.
I have a question first. I don't know whether that was going to be discussed at all under curriculum or whether it would be best answered now. Amy?
Okay, so we'll put that one off. Amy, if you and Paul can remember that for under curriculum, that would be great. And last, Kim Fahey, who asked the first question, said thank you. So thank you to you, Kim. And we'll move on to the Week of Respect report by Dr. Dolan.
Sure. And during this unique year, it's certainly important that we don't forget a lot of what we do every year, right? So this first full week of October is always a week of respect in New Jersey. And we actually like to call it a week of extra respect because every single week we should all be showing respect. So this week, our week of extra respect, at each of our 10 schools, teachers, counselors, and administrators are working with students to continue to build social and emotional learning and character education. So here are just a few examples of some of this work. So kindergarten teachers will read stories including, pay attention to this title. I love this title. The title of the book that kindergartners are reading, What If Everybody Did That? Isn't that a great title? You know, sometimes we have to stop and think. It's not just all about what we're doing. Their teachers will also discuss with students how they can be a good friend. Now, at the elementary level, students will be learning each day about what respect means. And they start to learn about the importance of respecting themselves in many ways, respecting others, and also respecting their environment. Teachers and librarians will be sharing respect-themed stories with children. Another important message for our students is that we take care of ourselves so that we may be our best for others. The staff in the middle school also work to make sure students understand New Jersey's harassment, intimidation, and bullying law. The students are reminded that this law not only applies to how they behave in school, but also how they behave on social media with their peers. At the secondary level, all three schools, the No Place for Hate committees are active participants in the activities of this week. And speaking of just the high school's No Place for Hate committee, we now have nearly 80 Westfield High School community members signed up, and that shows a tremendous interest in this important work. And I'm going to close with one other example to show that this is not the only week of respect in our schools. The high school continues another year of PAL tutoring, and it will begin this Wednesday, October 7th. In my view, this is a great example of how we can make every week a week of respect. For many years, the Police Athletic League has supported this program so that all Westfield High School students can have access to tutoring support. Weekly, Westfield High School teachers and students gather to help one another with assignments and to engage in discussion and socialization. And this year, PAL will meet on Wednesdays from 4 to 5:30 via WebEx. And if anyone has any questions about that, would like to either volunteer or would like to receive tutoring, high school students, please contact Mr. Hines at the high school, Assistant Principal Hines. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dolan. And it is a wonderful program. It's a wonderful program for both the high school students who do the tutoring and the students who get to know other students in the district and work one-on-one with them during the tutoring program. So it is a great program that's been in place for a very long time. Thank you, Dr. Dolan, for the updates. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Dolan?
Peggy, I didn't have a question, but I did want to make a comment. I did want to thank the Westfield Regional Health Officer, Megan Avalone, and all that her staff do day in and day out in coordination with the district as well as the nurses. I know it was a difficult time and there was a lot of information or should I say misinformation out there. And I know it's not easy to deal with the circumstances that we had to deal with a couple of weeks ago. But I just want to make sure I showed my appreciation for her as well as Dr. Dolan and administration for getting out some information on that Friday that really helped clarify and give further information on what was going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Anything else? Okay. Moving on, I'd like the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on September 15th, 2020.
Second.
Second.
Kent, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like the board to consider personnel items 1 through 28. Do I have a second?
Second.
Brendan? Dr. Dolan, I believe there's one that you would like to talk about?
There is. I'm very happy to announce, or to thank actually, Arlene Burstein, who has worked as both a substitute and a home instructor for our district since 1986. And I can't tell you how many times we reached out to her. The wonderful thing was she was a math instructor. And so often when we had a need for a math instructor for home instruction or as a substitute, I can't tell you how many times she helped out our district. So I'd like to thank her for her many years of service and wish her well in her retirement.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions on the personnel items? Dana, may we have a roll call?
Mike Phelan,
Yes.
Ken Diamond,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Rob Garrison,
Yes.
Brian Morrissey,
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes,
Amy Root.
Yes.
thank you. Moving on to facilities. Michael, do you have a report?
I can't hear him.
Michael? You're not on mute. I don't.
Now, you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is one, we haven't had a facilities meeting since we last met, but there is one ongoing project, which is the Edison Fields project. And we have for the joint project with both the Board of Education and the town, where we can look at how we can optimize the use of the Edison Fields. And there's an architectural group, the Speisel Architectural Group, who is developing a plan that we're looking to see how we can optimally use it for all the sports, including for band practice. So the consultants have been working. There was an on-site visit recently, and they've created a color-coded map of all the field layout and how the fields can be used. And they're going to continue working on this project, and we'll provide updates as progress progresses. But it is a project that is in progress. Our next actual facilities meeting is scheduled for next Friday, October 16th. That's where we are.
Mike,
Yes.
Mike, it's worth noting that the consultants and the architects, the town has hired them. We're not paying for them, correct?
That's correct. The town has hired Speisel. They're paying fully for the work that's being done. And this is really a town initiative, but the Board of Education is involved because they're doing the work on one of our fields.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the update. Long-range planning, Gretchen.
I apologize for background noise. My dogs feel like this is the appropriate time to go crazy, but I do not have a report tonight, but I think maybe I'll circle back with Dr. Dolan and Barbara and just sort of touch base. It's been a while since we met, and as we're sort of settling into, I guess, this quote unquote new normal, maybe there'll be an opportunity for us to meet, if not in October and November. So I'll reach out and follow up with the committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Gretchen. Policies, Brendan.
No report tonight. We'll have our first policies meeting for the year next week, Tuesday, the 13th. Yeah, 13th at 12 o'clock via WebEx.
Okay. Thank you, Brendan. Just making note of that. Moving on, curriculum, Amy.
Yes, I would like the board to consider curriculum item number 1, please. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I saw Brendan's hand go up first, so I'm going to go with that one. Thank you, Brendan. The item that we're considering is just approval of student instructor for the year. We don't have curriculum items. I'm sorry, we don't have curricula to review yet, but the committee was able to meet on September 24th, and I circulated some notes to you all yesterday. And we were able to get together the 4 members of the curriculum committee and Paul Pinero, and 4 of our district supervisors got together via WebEx to have a conversation that did address some of the questions that have popped up in the Q&A session about how can we cover all that we need to cover when the students are spending less time in class. And Paul, help me out when I get to a sticking point here, but one of the things that we did discuss was the idea that we're actually able to do more with less in a way, in part because there's fewer interruptions to the school day. There's not, during this kind of hybrid instruction, we're not going to be having assemblies. We're not having the kinds of interruptions that we normally have. Good interruptions. I don't mean that in a bad way, but things that do tend to take away from regular structure to the class day. And the other thing I think that's important to note is that at the middle school and the high school, the students, when they go in on our hybrid schedule, don't necessarily have every class every day that they're there, but they do have longer sections of the classes that they do meet for. And I think the teachers, some of the teachers and students are actually finding that really helpful. And it's almost a way for us to sort of try out a little bit of a block schedule of a kind. But if you take those longer class periods from those days, and then the time that they are able to meet, which is a little bit shorter on Wednesdays, a little bit more compressed, and office hours that allow them to meet in the afternoon, there's actually more time spent per subject than just half the time, as it may seem. So yes, it's not 100% of the same minutes, but it doesn't mean that the time is wasted, and it doesn't mean that the teachers aren't working to give the best quality instruction that they can in that time. We were able also to talk about some of the methods, and maybe Paul, this would be a good time for you to talk about some of the acceleration guidance that we're giving to our teachers. Would you mind chiming in on that?
Sure. And just to your point, I thought you explained really well what the supervisors conveyed. The minutes, it's 153 minutes currently versus in the regular world when we are not in the pandemic, 200 minutes. So it's not quite half of the time. It's less time. And for the reasons you explained, Amy, I think we're able to still execute the curriculum well. As far as the approaches to it, we got a few examples from supervisors as far as what it means to accelerate. An example from Warren Hines, who's the acting supervisor of language arts for 6 through 12, was, for example, in language arts, we don't necessarily have to read supplementary texts to deliver skills and to practice skills that can be done, say, one text. So it's a wonderful luxury to enrich a little further, and certainly it could lend itself to deeper learning, or at least deeper practice. But under the circumstances, if we do, if we stick to the core mentor texts and not necessarily add a secondary text to each skill that we're developing students, then they can move forward and not be held back. So it's something that teachers, it's not like they had to learn what it would mean to teach the essential elements from scratch. I mean, it's something that they can do intuitively at this point in their careers. Ideally, they wouldn't have to do it, but we have to do it. So we're very confident in monitoring very closely that the students are learning. And, you know, from what the principals report, and from what I see and what the supervisors report, we're feeling pretty good about instruction that we're delivering and the progress the students are making.
Yeah, and I think, Dr. Dolan, as you said earlier, I mean, I think, you know, it's important for parents to communicate with their teachers if they're seeing something with their students, because they're able to observe so much more now. If they're seeing something that they have concerns about, or they're looking for something more or something different, they should really start with their students' teachers to have that conversation. But it's interesting that a lot of the feedback we've been getting from families is really mixed. You know, one of the questions that's here on the Q&A section is, why can't they spend more time in classes or in front of their screens? And we have a number of families who are really not happy with it. They're spending as much time as they're spending in front of screens. So we're really trying to balance what's best for as many kids as we possibly can. But if there's situations that parents feel teachers need to know about, they really should reach out to them. And certainly, you know, it can be more challenging for teachers who are working on delivering hybrid instruction. They'll have students in a classroom in front of them, but they'll be on camera for the students who aren't in class that day to be observing. That can be challenging to try to keep up with, you know, the child who may be at home. Is their body language suggesting that they're maybe not as engaged as they might be if they were in the classroom? So, you know, I know it feels like we've been doing this for a long time, but this hybrid instruction model that we're doing right now, we're still really not even a month into it. So everybody's learning and everybody's trying to adapt. But if there's feedback, I think it would be helpful for parents to reach out to teachers as well.
Okay, Amy, I see a question here. How much longer are classes in the middle school now than in the regular schedule?
It's they're 50 minutes on Mondays and Tuesdays if you're the A cohort, and if you're the B cohort, it's Thursdays and Fridays. And then the Wednesday period is 23 minutes and 2 15-minute afternoon periods over the course of the week.
And what are they during our normal schedule when, we'll say, a year ago?
Oh, like 43 minutes, I think, a period.
Okay, so that's in the middle school, it goes from 43 up to 50, plus the Wednesday classes about what you said, 23 or 25 minutes?
23, yeah.
23. Okay, that was a question somebody asked. I'm just seeing if there's any that, address exactly what you guys were discussing here.
So I think there's a few things, if I'm reading the questions and answers, about the afternoon sessions. And I think it would be helpful, because I've discussed that recently with the middle schools, if Brian can make sure he captures all the questions and answers, and I can bring that back to the middle schools about what we think we're implementing and what parents see from their perspective, because that is valid.
And it's always a great idea too, because if one person has the question, many parents have the question. So it's an easy way for us to make sure that all that information is getting out to all the parents who also have similar questions, who are not watching our meeting this evening.
And one other question I see buried in there asked about metrics, how we're tracking student progress, so that we know whether our accelerated programs are effective or not.
Well, I would say that the teachers lean a little heavily on formative assessment, so not as many big projects. So, they do what they've always done. They're just probably, as I said, leaning on smaller things, not so much tests, but maybe quizzes. I think piecing it out that way is better and more frequently helps the teachers know whether there needs to be some kind of re-teaching going on. So really, the way they assess doesn't really change. As far as where we're at in the curriculum, the teachers work closely with the supervisors, especially at the departmentalized levels, and would continue to speak with them about, feels like we're not getting to where we would need to be to at this time of the year. Keeping in mind, it's October 6th. So even if there were going to be struggles with keeping up with our regular pacing, it would be hard to know that yet. When we meet in November for our in-service, our professional development day, then the teachers will really have a chance to get together before they provide the first marking period grades, which come a few weeks later in November. They'll be able to talk a little bit about the evidence that they've collected, and they'll also be able to talk about where they're at in the curriculum. So I was just speaking to people today. So the question is actually very well timed. I was speaking to principals and supervisors today about how to best utilize the time on that one in-service day. And one thing was assessments. The other one was the curriculum, where we're at, and whether or not we need to adjust further, or if it's going to be a problem to get through the curriculum for the year. So far, so good. But by November 3rd, it's another month in, we may be seeing something differently. So yeah, I agree that it was something we have to continually monitor. We can monitor it with most of the usual tools that we normally would use. But I think really getting the professionals together, and not just on the in-service day, but we do it pretty regularly each week, to really gauge where we're at is important. Probably the biggest challenge is math, but luckily I stay in close contact with Liz D'Alessandro, who's just a whiz, and she's done a really good job, looked over a lot of different resources over the summer to be able to sort of zero in on what would be considered essential elements and how to stay on pace so that something like Algebra 1 gets done when Algebra 1 is supposed to be completed. So yeah, I mean, monitoring is really important, and measuring it in ways that are both anecdotal and, numbers quantifiable is important. And, we'll stay on top of it. So far, so good, but we'll have to stay on top of it.
Agreed. And I think I would just like to add that I understand that this is really hard for parents. This is not what you had in mind. I don't care how old your child is. This was not the year you were picturing for your child, right? That's fair enough. And I truly understand that. But I'd also like to think about it from the teacher point of view. They've been working quite hard in this new process to do the best we can with 110 different rules that are on top of us. There are an awful lot of things we can't change and we can't do. And then to suddenly like shift without thinking through what we're shifting to is not going to help anyone. So we're not disregarding the suggestions. That's why I asked that they be captured. That's why we really do read all the emails and attempt to respond to every email. We are looking at the different suggestions that are made. Truthfully, a lot of them, we know the reasons why they can't work under our rules and regulations, but we're open to looking at other ones, but we can't hop to it. And I would just remind people that there are almost 250 districts in the state of New Jersey that have not yet brought in their students. They couldn't figure out even a way to do hybrid. Hybrid is not perfect. It's not where we want to end, but there are almost 250 districts that are not bringing in their children at all. And we were able to do that, and we will continue to listen to you. Honestly, we will, and we'll take suggestions that can work. But we also are not going to flip on a dime to try to do something that either can't work or doesn't address all of the students. And then those are some of the concerns that we're working with.
Okay, I see. I mean, there are quite a few questions here, and I appreciate, Dr. Dolan, that we will go over them. Brian will capture them, and we will look at all of them and address them. But there seems to be one question here that maybe we could clarify for, all board members and also the middle school students is, there's a lot of questions about the expectations for afternoon. And as I read a lot of the questions, it seems that people have different ideas as to what the afternoon session at the middle school is what is required of the afternoon session at the middle school. I see some that say my child signs in and gets off. I see other people have different ideas. If maybe either you or Paul could go over the expectations for the afternoons at the middle school, I think that would be a good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So the students do check in the afternoon with their teachers. I know that there are some students who have really benefited from those check-ins because they have needed the extra guidance, whether they are remote or in person. I know that's the case. It may also be true that some kids are checking in and the teachers are saying they can leave right away. We can check into that and see if that's the best use of their time or not. The stories I was hearing today were about students who, last year when we went to all remote, obviously that didn't work for everyone, right? And we pretty much lost some kids in a way. We kept on reaching out to them. The teachers reached out, the guidance counselors reached out. Everyone was trying to reach out to keep the students going, but for a variety of reasons they couldn't. Well, these check-ins, I was talking today to 2 different principals, have been helping that. So some of the students that really needed that support or guidance are getting it in the check-ins. I can certainly believe that's not working for everybody, and maybe that's what we're hearing. And we can certainly go back and see if there's something we can do better with that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dolan. I'm going to go on with the meeting and see if I can look through some of these questions also, so that when we get back to open session again for questions at the end of the meeting, maybe we could take a couple more of the questions.
I think he has a comment.
Oh. Go ahead, Dr. Dolan.
Sorry, thanks. I just saw one other question in the midst. It was about, it was about Halloween at Halloween at the elementary level. The elementary principals are working on that. Halloween, as we know, is on Saturday, but we're also trying to see what might be possible during this pandemic. It hasn't been resolved yet. It's been discussed, but it hasn't been resolved yet. We'll make sure that gets communicated.
Right.
Okay. And before we move on from curriculum, we have to actually vote on the single item under curriculum. Right, Dana?
Yes, we do. Ready for that? Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Kent Diamond,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Rob Garrison,
Yes.
Brian Morrissey,
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes, and the next curriculum meeting is October 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to finance. Kent.
Thanks, Peggy. I'd like the board to consider items 1 through 16. May I have a second, please? Rob, thank you. I want to call out a couple gifts. First, I'd like to accept a gift of $20,000 from the Westfield Education Fund to purchase diversity books for students in grades 3, 4, and 5. So thank you to them. Next, I'd like to accept a gift of $250 from Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs for Franklin School teacher Miss Vaglio to use for student needs in the class in which their grandchild is a student. And I'd like to thank them again because they've also donated a gift of $250 to Franklin School for the grandchild's teacher, Miss Newhouse, for use for student needs in the class. So thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs for their 2 gifts. I assume you guys have had a chance to review the items 1 to 16. Nothing out of the ordinary, just your normal bill stuff. We are moving $60,000 out of the capital reserve for electrical work associated with the courtyard at the high school for the Dr. Nelson Memorial. Otherwise, it's just the normal bills and that kind of thing. Anyone have any questions? No? Dana, may we have a roll call, please?
Actually, so I think a point of order. So typically, if we were all meeting in person, people, members of the community who are in the audience would be allowed to come up and ask a question before we voted. So I just happened to see that somebody in the Q&A posed a question specific to one of the items on the facilities agenda. So is it appropriate for us to address that now?
The facility.
I suppose she asked, she said.
I mean, the finance, I'm sorry.
Right. She asked if she could ask a question. I don't see that she'd have to ask that question. It would be Diana Pepitone. So if you.
Oh, you're right. You're right. There's no actual question there. It was just permission to ask a question. So can we give her an opportunity to type her question?
Sure.
Yes, the only way we have to ask questions this evening is to type in your questions. She asked on the thing, must questions be asked in typed form? Is that correct, Brian?
Is there a reason why we can't use audio?
I can enable audio for an individual if she'd like to ask a question.
So Diana, if you would like to ask your question using audio, would you let us know? And we can allow that. The woman's name, Brian, is Diana Pepitone.
Yes, she's saying unmute her.
Yes.
She's unmuted.
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I do appreciate the opportunity to ask the questions through the microphone rather than typing. The questions I had were with regard to item number 11 on the finance attachment, which reads, except, and I think it was referenced by Mr. Diamond in the lead-in, a gift of $20,000 from the Westfield Education Fund.
That's item number 10, yes.
Books in for students in grades 3 through 5. Mm-hmm. So my question is specifically and particularly because grades 3 through 5 is a particularly impressionable age. The question I had is whether or not the books that are on this list for purchase are publicly viewable or publicly accessible to know what those titles are. That's my first question. I have others, but whether the members of the board are aware of the titles of the books on that list of diversity books.
Diana, from a policy perspective, we approve textbooks, but we don't approve supplementary materials for the classroom. And that's something we've done every year. Dr. Dolan, if you could expand on that.
We have discussed this. I'm sorry to interrupt for a second, but we have discussed this at previous meetings. There have been announcements that we have had our language arts supervisor for the district and our social studies supervisor for the district that were involved in reviewing what we were calling literacy circles, right, Paul? For the lower grades. And they were basically trying to review what kinds of materials are available so that there might be some, not to necessarily teach diversity, but to represent, be available to supplement classroom instruction, like reading groups that they have, right, at the elementary school level, that just show people from different backgrounds, was my understanding.
Right. Inclusivity is a huge piece of it. they're not necessarily in direct instruction in diversity from that regard. There's certainly themes to that extent added as well in the books, but mostly it's representing, right, as you're saying, a diversity of people, within the text.
So it sounds as though the members of the board have not seen the list of supplementary materials, the list of titles.
Well, the standard practice is for committees of teachers in something like supplemental text or texts that go in libraries to use a criteria that's state approved and that's approved by our Board of Ed policy. And typically what it winds up being is we use the texts that are by the profession deemed to be award-winning and exceptional texts that are good for kids. So a lot of those titles you would probably find in your library.
Oh, yeah, it would be very helpful to have that publicly available, being that this particular area of instruction is very recently developed and not accepted across areas, practices, and practitioners, and are generally seen as controversial. And just given the age, grades 3 through 5, that level of oversight with regard to the specific titles on the list would be appreciated, or at least if the public could be directed to where those titles might be found, especially since, as I said, they're being introduced to such a younger age group. And to the point of, you had referenced two individuals, was that Andrea Brennan and Dr. Tiffany Jacobson that are composing the list?
Yes, along with the committees at every grade level. I mean, they did put in dozens of hours with dozens of people to make sure and do the right thing. So,
and then I guess finally on that point, whether or not the board was aware of Bob Woodson's January 2020 opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, which followed on the December Board of Education meeting where the elective about power and privilege was approved by the board, where Bob Woodson specifically references that meeting and the approval of that into the curriculum. Had the board members had the opportunity to read that opinion piece?
Yes, I think we all probably have.
Yes, it is an opinion piece, correct. I read it as well.
Yeah, and given the highlight that opinion piece with its national distribution brings to the town of Westfield and our educational choices, this particular diversity book grant and purchase falls within that same area of study. And given that we've already been highlighted once, and that was for at the high school level, concern from the community that now we're reaching down into the lower grade levels with the same, it's essentially the same materials, that we take care that we don't again be open ourselves up to highlighting in the national media for materials that, as Bob Woodson stated, sort of pass on a lethal message of despair and distortion of history, an embodiment of the oppressor narrative, which undermines agency within the Black community. So it just would be an unfortunate thing to step into that again without oversight of the board, which is why I was particularly concerned about the titles and that those titles come before the board for review and at least, a passing glance over the content and the authors.
So this is, I don't know that, first of all, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think the board has we devoted 2 entire meetings to the power and privilege curriculum, and community members came, board voted And as Rob pointed out, the piece you're referring to is an opinion piece. I mean, it is not, I don't think it appropriate for the board to change its policy to look at every single book that may be purchased with the funds that have been generously donated by the Ed Fund. We don't currently look at every book. We don't vet books about white families. We don't vet books about, Black families. I mean, I think that this is the result of lots of efforts of the community, of our staff to create a more diverse experience for all of our students. And the board is a governing board, and we have administrators who make these decisions. So I don't know. My opinion is it's not appropriate for us to have to vet these. It's not within our policy. And we move forward appropriately.
Okay, I would only raise the point, given the experimental nature of it. These are not well-established areas. And so while I understand math textbooks may not regularly be reviewed and approved by the board because there are professionals in the area reviewing them, this is an area where there is not a well-developed sort of professional base. And the concern that our school be brought forward, and while it's an opinion piece, it's the opinion of a well-renowned civil rights leader. And if our goal is to put forward civil rights and acceptance of that area within the community, you ignore the opinion of someone who spent their life fighting for civil rights.
If I could jump,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that Mr. Woodson actually spent the time in our well, I know he wasn't in our meetings, but I don't know that he went through the curriculum to that extent. He may have been based on just in general theory, what he feels about teaching, whether it's a connection to critical race theory or what have you. But it's a history course. They're facts. I mean, these are facts about Jim Crow laws. It's not an untested area. It's a factual history class.
Right. And Paul, if I may, and that was decided last year, as Gretchen mentioned, and that's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about books for younger children and books that open up the world to children to see the world through other children's eyes as part of it. That's not controversial. It's not even particularly new. It's just a focus that we're having because we've been listening to community at large. What we're going to do with students in grades 3 through 5 is not anything like a course we're doing with high school students. It's completely different. It's not the same thing. It's not about critical race theory. It's about making sure our students' eyes are opened in a way that's appropriate for their ages. That's all that we're doing. It's nothing more than that.
That would be wonderful. And I think that the availability of the titles would help comfort the community, because given last fall's controversy, I think that there are members of the community that are concerned that that is exactly what's happening. So some transparency and sunlight on the titles might do exactly as you say and alleviate some of those concerns, and also alleviate some of the back and forth that might be going on if those were available for people to look at and say, you know what, yeah, these are just fine. This is, no problem. So I think it's really the lack of transparency that is probably more the root concern, given that we just don't know what's in those books if we don't know the titles.
Right. And as has been said, we've been speaking about this project for a number of meetings, so we can certainly continue to be transparent about it. We haven't been hiding it. It's been talked about. We promoted it. We've put it out on notices, and we can certainly continue to do that because we have no intention of not being transparent. We have been being transparent.
So the titles are available. If they are, if you could just put that information out where we could find them.
We're still
Paul, so we just got the gift, right? It was am I correct that this is a gift? So the books haven't been purchased. This is money that's made available to respond to all of the work of the committees in our schools, correct?
Yes. I mean, there's a list that the teachers did recommend from their committees. And then with the funds that we're receiving, we're purchasing as many as we can from that list. So the titles can be available.
That would be wonderful. That's really the basis of what I'm asking, is just that list that's been compiled, that it become available to the community, that they can access it through whatever means that you think is transparent and equally accessible to the community. That's all. That's really the basis of my request.
Okay, and I just want to reiterate some of the things that Gretchen and Brendan said, that we are following our policy, which is not to review every purchase list that comes out there of the supplemental books in our schools. That is our policy, and we rely on the administrators in our school to follow the best practices in purchasing these books. For me, I see it as an opportunity for children to be able to look at books that don't all have themselves in it, or that there are other nationalities in our district that they can go find a book that represents them and their families. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to expand our library. And I'm also thinking that probably the public library is trying to do it also, in expanding just the books that we have in our district for kids to see what life for other nationalities is like. So, Paul, just where would that list be available
Right.
when they do the purchasing?
I think it's best to, rather than come up with a list, that we have a long list and then we have what we're purchasing. So that is literally in the computer in the purchasing process now, but we're also working with the Ed Fund to finalize the amount of dollars and all of that we're going to be working with. So I guess once we know exactly what we're purchasing, we can look at the policy together and see, where that would fit as far as sharing the titles. For example, at the end of most years, and I'm not saying we would have to do that, but at the end of every year, there is a long list that we present to the board just to put on record for public, to be open to the public, all the titles that we do use. So that's typically what happens in the policy, but.
I'm sorry, Paul, I hate to interject, but does that mean that the list is put out after the children have access to the books or before the children have access to the books?
Well, the thing is this, by state law, each year, we're supposed to put a whole bunch of different things through the Board of Ed at the end of the year with regard to texts, the different curriculum that have been approved.
For the coming year?
Well, yeah, what's existing at that moment. I think if you think of it as not a process where people are looking to agree or disagree with what's in there, technically, we're the professionals, we're the experts. We purchase and provide the resources that we need to teach according to the standards and the laws and the policies of the board. And then organically, if a parent were to have a question or concern, and we've had this over the years, and we've had some really robust conversations about certain books, but organically, when something comes up, then we address it, and then there can be a committee of the board that's an ad hoc that will say that this book is inappropriate.
Right.
So it's just, if you think of it more like not a process where everything is approved piecemeal, but more like if there's an issue that any parent or community member can certainly come forward with it.
And I understand that, particularly that makes a lot of sense with regard to older children, but with regard to the age of these children, it's something that if the parents don't know about it in advance, they might have, the children are not sort of savvy enough to come forward on their own and present it to their parents. And they may be books that stay in the classroom where they never come home in a backpack. So the question is particularly with this area and the age, coupled with the age of the student, as I understand it, grades 3 through 5, that rather than waiting until an issue comes up and a parent brings the issue that has arisen forward, that the parents just simply have the ability, if they wish, and they may not wish to, but if they wish, to just access a click-through with the list of books that fall under the racial literacy book list.
Well, keeping in mind, I understand your point completely. I really do. It's a racial literacy initiative, and we've named it that, so you're right about that. But when we started creating the lists last year, we didn't anticipate, we didn't anticipate a lot of things. We didn't anticipate what was going to happen last spring in a couple of areas with regard to race relations. But it is within our policy and even an expectation by the state that we absolutely provide children with a diverse experience. We owe it to them. So the idea is the law and our own policy instructs us to follow certain guidelines to make sure that we are representing the world as it really is and not trying to, so that we represent the world the way it is. So there are guidelines for that. So within those guidelines, and because we were being monitored last year, we wanted to make sure that we were compliant. If anything, the concern was that we weren't compliant for not having enough diversity. It's not like we're trying to cram diversity down, in any way. So we're just trying to be compliant, and in the process, teachers were pretty energized to look at many different new titles. And so we're not really seeing it. I mean, it is a racial literacy initiative, but when the process started, we were just trying to get some more books and to provide a more diverse selection for students. And so, especially for the younger ages, I know what you're saying. I mean, even when we deal with topics that relate to the Holocaust, we have to be very sensitive to the age appropriateness of it. So really, when we're starting with the younger kids, it comes down to a lot of making sure that there's just different people in the books that we're providing the students, a diversity of people that represents our society.
And
Can I
that's
give-
all
can I-
well and good.
No,
It's
can I-
really just about sunlight and what, we can obviously talk here about what we wish is in this set of books, what we think is in this set of books, but really the rubber hits the road with actually what is in the books. And that is the question that I'm concerned about, because the bell cannot be unrung. So essentially that's the point. It is not so much about what we think is in the books, and that would be the members of the board as well, since it sounds as though the members of the board have not read the books. But the concern is not with regard to exposure to other cultures and races. In fact, that's a wonderful thing. Diversity and the learning of diversity is a wonderful thing. What's a concern is the narrative that often nestles itself within the framework of diversity, which is, as Bob Woodson put it forward, the oppressor narrative, which is something that is not appropriate for grades 3 through 5. So to the extent these books are just, looking at other cultures, wonderful. Sunlight should not do them any harm.
Can I make one last comment, and then I think we should probably move along and vote? I just wanted to give a simple example of the kind of thing we're talking about. This is not a grade 3 through 5 kind of a book, but if you can remember the picture book, The Snowy Day, it's just pictures. It's a little boy in the snow in his snowsuit. That little boy happens to have darker brown skin. And I wasn't even aware of it when I looked through the book as a little girl. But for a kid who has darker skin, to see themselves represented in just a book like that, that's not about being Black, it's just about being a kid on a snowy day, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about with these kinds of books. So that's all I wanted to say. I do want to move along. I don't want to debate it any further. I just wanted to offer that as an example.
That's wonderful. And that type of book sounds absolutely wonderful, but it's really not about what we think the books are. It's really about what the books are. And so I would repeat my request that there be access to the list for the public to the extent that any number of those books are not just a snowy day.
And I guess
To move the conversation along, we will give the public the same access that we give to all texts that we give access to in the district. Is that fair to say, Paul?
Right. And also we will follow the policy that we follow for purchasing all books that, and if that is to put a list out and that's what our policy says, that's what we'll do. If it's not to put a list out, and we will follow our policy that we have followed for purchasing all books that have been added to the library of the schools, and if it's available and if it's the right thing to do within our policy.
I appreciate that, and I would hope that the public will be made aware of when that list becomes available and by what means. Thank you so much for the time. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Diana. I just want to, before we move off of SIP and we vote, I'm just going to answer one other person. Somebody asked, can parents attend the SIP meeting? And the answer is those meetings are not open to the public. Those are committee meetings within the board. Each committee meets once a month, and the public is not at part of those meetings. What they're issues that are discussed at those meetings, and they're brought forward at each of our board meetings. You'll see it's on our agenda every month, the SIP portion. So you could ask questions at that point in time. Moving forward, so we are going to vote on finance. We're on SIP. I forgot.
We're on finance.
We're on
Finance.
Yes, we're on finance. Michael Beelin,
Yes.
Ken Diamond,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Rob Garrison,
Yes.
Brian Morrissey,
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
Okay. Moving forward, Rob, do you have a technology report?
I do, and I apologize to the members for not providing this sooner. I've been on the road all day and having some technical issues, but I do thank Brian Walker and Miriam McCann for providing information that I'll read now, and I'll also send out to the members later on. In terms of the communications part of the committee meeting, we did meet on Friday. Marianne gave an update that there have been 40 superintendent Friday updates since February 28th. We've also had 281 Facebook posts, 160 Twitter posts. The idea is to try and get as much information out there in a diverse universe as possible through the different social media means, as well as the district has posted 13 videos in the past 12 months, which deal with different topics that are all accessible on the district website. For those of you who are near any of the schools, you'll also see that there have been a number of infographics and custom signage, about 30 or so of those that have been put up throughout the different schools, so that you talk about social distancing, talking about how to enter and exit the schools. So really, and the great thing is that with Marianne and others that have been brought on board and part of the district and the administration, that's all done in-house, and it's really been great to see some of those changes and be able to get information out there in a way that's easy, accessible. Even Dr. Dolan mentioned earlier the idea of trying to get 1 and 2 pagers out there on different topics, as opposed to just navigating someone to a link on our website, which isn't a bad thing either, but it's good to be able to simplify it and be able to make it as easy as possible and accessible as possible for parents. We do encourage parents to join and residents to join the Facebook Westfield School District Facebook page and Instagram pages. A lot of good information provided throughout the year. And as far as Brian Walker going over technology, it's been quite an interesting school year so far. And in terms of what technology has been doing, I'll go with the Chromebooks first. So the district distributed 5,000 Chromebooks to students, to all students in grades 1 through 9, and students that needed a device in grades 10 through 12. There were also over 100 iPads distributed to kindergarten students. And all district security and filtering policies are in effect on all district issued devices. So one of the questions I asked is, and I think Ken even brought it up during the committee meeting, was security issues, also Wi-Fi and internet issues. And so Brian and his staff have really been on top of a number of those issues and things that we may not even think of. Coming up shortly, there'll be new cameras for teacher laptops. Cameras with HD capabilities and dual microphones were purchased and will be distributed, have been and will be continue to be distributed to teachers over the next couple weeks. And that is really trying to help with the picture and sound quality in order to enhance the remote experience for students. And then one of the bigger things, and Brian had, again, had tip to the hat to you and staff for dealing with the issues that we had with the Genesis server a week or so ago, I can't remember when it was, where there was the need to actually rebuild the Genesis server to address the parent portal issues. And since the server was rebuilt, there have been no problems that we've noticed. And so thank you, Brian. Thank you, staff, and the rest of the district for that. I don't know if there are any questions or anything else that directed towards me, Brian, or Marianne, but welcome those from the board.
Rob, it's Mike. There's an email that Brian had sent out about some users, and I don't know how widespread, that users are experiencing issues with the video conferencing. I was going to bring this up in curriculum, but it was really more technology related. And really from the curriculum standpoint, how is that impacting the curriculum? And as far as what students, we mentioned about how many minutes per week the students are learning, but how, if they're experiencing technical issues, how is that impacting their school day? Because some kids, we recommended a second device, but a third grader just has enough problem using a computer. That's across the wrong way. It's a challenge. So use a computer and a phone at the same time. And now we reference about how we're equipping the teachers with high definition cameras, which further increases the amount of bandwidth that's being sent. I realize if they're using a regular camera, but are we looking at upgrading the Chromebooks to go and for the students to allow them to support both the higher definition or at least minimize the impact that they're experiencing when using the Chromebooks?
I'll let Brian answer some of that, but I'll go into it a little bit. Is that it was a long process in terms of purchasing the Chromebooks that we currently have, and again, to Brian's credit, as we look at longer periods of remote learning and even how these experiences during COVID might change future learning experiences. And I forget the term Brian used off the top of my head. He'll probably say when he talks in a little bit. But those things are looked at in terms of different, better Chromebooks, higher capacity. I've even had, or I say I guess it's because my daughter's having some issues here and there, where there is some slowing of when you have multiple tabs up and information going. I don't think there's a magic bullet for any of this. I will say, though, that I know that Brian and staff in conversations and emails, they're certainly made aware, and it's important that teachers, students, and others make the district, their teachers, principals, and district aware of any issues they may be having so they can be addressed. Brian, I don't know if you have any specific comments you want to make or if that's covers it enough on your end.
Sure. I'll address a few of the things that you brought up, Mike. So first of all, we just have to keep in mind, we're going from supporting the Westfield Public School District and our school buildings to now as a technology department having to support all of these individual networks that everyone has in their home. Everyone has a different configuration. Everyone has different speed capabilities. Everyone has different hardware available. So we wanted to try to make some sort of a standard, and we provided Chromebooks to as many students as possible. And we continue to do that. We've not given out all that we have. We still have some available for students that still need devices or students that experience a problem where a device stops working so we can replace it while it's getting repaired. So we're doing those things, but let's keep in mind one important thing. I think this is what Rob was starting to allude to. These are Chromebooks. They are not full capacity laptops. We originally purchased the Chromebooks to do a lot of online testing when TARC was first instituted by the state. We purchased them for that. And while they're good for online testing, they get they get overburdened and taxed very quickly when you start running applications such as video conferencing. So what we're doing right now would tax a Chromebook. It may be able to run and it may be able to function just doing video conferencing, but as soon as you put an additional layer on there of opening up an additional tab and saying, let's go in and let's do a Google Doc right now as a group in class. So Paul has been working and Janine Gacco has been working with our teachers to try to, keep them up to date and maybe, look at some of the ways of what they're doing with the students that are remote so that they don't overtax those machines. Because if they do open up multiple tabs, some of the Chromebooks, most of the Chromebooks, I should say, do slow to a crawl. I mean, we realize that. And we've already updated our teachers so that they're aware of that. And we also want the parents to understand that. So whenever possible, we would suggest that, if you have a device at home, please try to utilize that device at home. You'll probably see better performance. That may not require multiple devices, trying to juggle a phone and a device, but if you have a child and they can sit there and they can use either a newer Chromebook or a newer laptop that's a little bit more powerful, you probably will see better experience. So I don't know if you have any other questions besides that, Mike, or if that answers everything you
No,
had.
that answered it. I just, the concern is really just the impact on the curriculum, because I know we had some comments earlier about how many minutes students are learning. I'm just wondering how it's impacting, the overall curriculum. And I realize, we're rolling it out and everybody could have every different Wi-Fi or hardwired connection or everything, but it's just, what can we do going forward to just try to expand it, because it's not a short-term way to just try to improve the experience. That's all.
Yeah, and then just real quick on the new high-definition cameras that we're getting for the teachers. They are high definition, but you have to keep in mind, too, that the video conferencing platforms do not support the full capabilities those cameras have. So while they can go at a much higher resolution, the video conferencing platform, when it's in this type of an environment where you have multiple faces up on a screen, it's not going to overtax the machines too much. You also have to remember it would only be one video stream that's at high definition. All the other ones would be at a lower definition. So it does not put that much more of a burden on the Chromebook, even though it's, like I said, not a high-powered machine. And then the other thing, too, is that high definition comes in handy when a teacher is trying to use a whiteboard in the classroom, or if they're trying to use that same camera as a document camera, which they're able to do. They're able to pick it up off of the laptop and move it around. They can turn it around and they can face the classroom now, and it's got a wider angle lens than the one that's built into the teacher laptop that they have. So it just provides some additional capabilities, and it does not, take that much of a hit on the technology.
No, that's understood, but if they have an older Chromebook, they're not going to necessarily have a high-definition camera, so they really won't take advantage of that additional view. They might get a little bit more crispness, but it's not going to take full advantage unless they have a more powerful laptop. So that's all.
Sorry about it. I had to go on mute and deal with my dog, so I had to go off video for a second there with my puppy. Sorry about that. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Brian. If there's nothing else, that's all I have to report. I don't know if we have a next meeting date, but typically it's we try and do it the Friday before the next meeting, so probably sometime around the 23rd, give or take, I think is our next one.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. I'd like the board to consider the notes for the record. So consider, do we have any unfinished business? No? Do we have any new business to come forward? No? Does anybody have any liaison reports?
I met with the Tamaqua PTO last night. It was pretty standard stuff. They talked about different events for the school year or how to do things in a virtual environment, hybrid environment. But they also said the kids were doing well with the mask wearing and the social distancing. They joked and said the kids seem to be doing a better job than the parents. But no complaints. Everything was good. It was just a normal PTO meeting, which was good to see, given the environment that we're in.
Thanks, Kent. I also attended the Jefferson PTO meeting. Yes, they had praise for the students and the teachers and all that's being done. They're trying to look at what they normally do in their school through the PTOs in the school year and seeing how they can recreate it in the remote sort of fashion. I did see that they did their mum sale, and you could pick up your mums or you could have them delivered and so forth. So they're still continuing some of their fundraising plans. They're also they do a lot of service activities, trying to adjust those in ways that they can do during COVID also. So they were very upbeat, which is very hard in these type of situations, but still, trying to provide the support to the schools and the students and the parents and so forth. So it was a nice meeting to be part of, and I appreciate all the work that they do.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I also attended the Zoom meeting for the Garden State Coalition of Schools. It's a really informative discussion. The Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Deb Cornavaca, was on the phone, trying to give as much of an update and give the schools that participate in the GSCS updated on any policies at the Department of Education. gave an update with the new commissioner there. So it's great to attend those Zoom meetings. They do provide information. I believe all board members also get a little bit of a recap of those meetings with the news and notes that are sent out. But I do thank the GSCS for all that they do as well for the school boards and districts.
Okay, moving on, we will recognize the public for questions and or comments. Let me just clarify one thing. Gretchen brought it to the table that somebody had a particular question about something we were going to vote on. So that is why we opened up the mic to hear the comments from the community in reference to something that we were going to vote on, so that we could hear those comments before the vote and, do our best to vote for, what we believe to be the right decision, which is why we opened up the conversation in that particular situation. There are a lot of questions and answers on the side. When we had this the last time, it worked very well for us to be able to go through those questions and put together whether or not it was a frequently asked questions or specifically answering people's questions that they ask on the side. If there's a question that has been asked multiple times, we can put that into frequently asked questions. If there's something that's a particular question for one particular parent, we can do that. It's very hard to read through all of these questions and answer them. But if anybody on the board sees a particular question that they think that should be addressed at this time and would not be appropriate to reach out to the particular person and answer directly, please let me know. It's hard for me to keep the meeting going and read questions on the side. So any help that you can do, that would be great. And if you have any other questions, please type them in the Q&A session at this time. Okay, so that being said, nobody, the last question I think can be directly answered. I know she also asked a question in reference to backpacks being very heavy for students going back and forth to school. I think that most of the questions could be answered after the meeting. I just wanted to see if anybody else, if you agree with this or not agree with this for the board members.
You agree with this approach, Peggy? Is that what you mean?
Answer the questions after the meeting or to sit here and read them and
Yeah, I mean,
I think there was a decent amount of duplication. Like you, Peggy, I didn't read every single one, but I scrolled and I think that there's some sifting and sorting that can be done here. It might be the most productive use of everyone's time for the administration to spend some time working their way through them. And then I think the FAQs are still being posted, right? Maybe that's the best way. And there may be specific contact that has to be made with respect to some of them as well.
And it's worth noting our normal public comment procedure isn't to respond to every comment right away. Sometimes we just sit there and listen and work on a better answer in the future, even when we're in person. So taking these and reviewing them and answering them in full later isn't different from our typical approach.
I agree. And, in our normal meetings, had we been in the boardroom, we would not be debating any issues with any of the particular people who come forth with questions. So I want to stay away from the debating of a situation, but rather giving information that's factual and that you can use to see how we made our decisions and how the kids go to school and what's best for them. So that being said, I would like the board to approve the following resolution. Resolve that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law and harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents. And be it further resolved that any discussions held by the board which need not remain confidential and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Do I have a second?
Second.
Brendan? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. So our meeting is, we're moving into private session. I thank everybody, and we will be looking at the questions and answers and getting back to the community on those questions and answers that were provided on the side. Thank you.
Yep. Everybody saw the link from Dana to the executive session?
Yes. Thank you.